Oh, thank you for joining us today for our Career Conversations podcast. And we're really pleased to welcome today Dr. Charlie Markus as our guest. He was a postdoctoral fellow here with the Beckman Foundation a few years ago. And Charlie, we're really excited that you're here and willing to share a little bit about your journey. So welcome.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
Yeah, and I like to start kind of at the beginning. So if you could talk just a little bit about when did you first think science? When did you get that kind of spark and what was really exciting to you that made you kind of go into college or where did you really get going with science?
Right. I from a very young age, I was very interested in science. I think from encouraging from my parents and from science teachers, but I hadn't really thought of it as my career as like becoming a scientist. And starting undergraduate, I was actually very I didn't declare a major my freshman year. I was taking a wide variety of classes, but it was kind of those initial science classes. So my advanced chemistry or general chemistry class had a great professor who got me really excited about the research he was doing and the coursework that he was teaching, as well as enjoying the curriculum of my math and chemistry classes. So that's what kind of started me just in general falling in love with science, was just actually the course curriculum as an undergraduate.
Did you jump into the research lab then?
Yeah, and I
Like that professor's research. Yeah.
So my actual start in being involved in research, not just like laboratories involved with classes, was there was an intermediate organic synthesis class at the University of Wisconsin, where the first half you do some more advanced synthesis kind of steps in a class laboratory, but in the second half, they match you with a professor and you start doing undergraduate research. And so I guess it was sort of finding my own path, and that was the time that really pushed me to be in a laboratory research setting. And so that matched me with Professor Howard Zimmerman at the University of Wisconsin, who was a well-known organic photochemist, but at the time he was emeritus, so it was this laboratory of all undergraduates. And that was a unique experience, which I think at the time I didn't realize how strange it was that we were 3 undergraduates with all this lab space and kind of somewhat free reign, but it turned out to be a really good learning experience because we had to be self-reliant and kind of design all these synthesis approaches ourselves and run it and then talk to the professor. So so that ended up being probably more of a unique situation than I had realized in the moment, but it was a really great moment early on and is what got me started with research.
Yeah. So then I assume you made a step then to graduate school, and you talked to us a little, like, what were you thinking about with graduate school, and particularly how did you find a right fit? Did you really lean into some mentors along the way?
Right. I think it was a matter of finding good mentors. So I think as an undergraduate, because again, you can enjoy science, but you don't necessarily know what that career path looks like. So it was having some professors who I had taken their classes like encourage which programs they think are exciting for PhDs, because I wasn't really sure what the differences between these schools were. Another step was I got an opportunity to be an undergraduate research intern at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California. And so that also was sort of a shift in my focus in research, because at the time I was doing organic synthesis. And so at JPL, I was doing more of a physical chemistry project. So instead of synthesis, it was high vacuum systems, optics, ultra cold samples, thinking about chemistry on the surface of moons. So it was sort of a big shift, but that's kind of what lit a fire under me. And I was like, I could do this like forever. Like this is awesome. And so that was what kind of guided where I was looking at graduate schools at that time. And I think it was just, that sort of moment of like seeing what the career path would look like aside from graduate school or maybe through master's versus like a PhD. And I think that's when I was like, these are the types of problems I really like and the type of work. And so, the mentors at JPL as well as professors in Madison both were encouraging and helpful in navigating that moment.
I imagine seeing people who work as scientists too. Like, were you exposed to that early on, or was that JPL thing kind of the first group of people who go to work every day and do science?
Yeah, I mean, apart from, I guess, the graduate students and professors at Madison, like, yeah, that was like going to a place where it's just, yeah, it's engineers and scientists all trying to work on really cool problems of, either understanding the science retrieved from a space mission or trying to build robots to go to space. And so that was yeah, definitely captures the imagination, also really inspiring to be put in that environment, in that very early stage.
How did you come across that?
So that was, like I said, I said that I was interested in science from a young age, and a lot of that was in astronomy and like space exploration and all that. So I think I kind of had it in my head that working for NASA would be a dream job as an undergraduate. And so I think just searching myself found that they had this undergraduate research program. And yeah, I guess this would be some advice for younger people looking. I think I applied like 8 or 9 times, like every single, like any semesters, just like at every opportunity I thought looked cool, and then got a match. And so got to go. But it was, yeah, so that was definitely me like thinking that would be an exciting thing to do. And
Well, that's cool, because we'll get to the fact that that's where you are now.
that's where I am now. So I came back.
Yeah. So what did you work on in grad school? Was that?
Right. So my graduate school, so in graduate school, I was doing a physical chemistry project investigating molecules that exist in space. And so the idea was to generate, well, what I was doing was generating gas phase ions and using really sensitive optical techniques to measure where they absorb light, very specific frequencies. And so it was a project that both supported the ability to try and find these molecules in space, as well as trying to understand their structure and bonding. So it was very much a combination between physical chemistry on a fundamental level, as well as analytical chemistry and learning how to build these instruments and push them kind of to their limits. And yeah, so in that, studied a variety of interstellar molecules, and also had the opportunity to go to Germany for a short time to work with a collaborator who had a different experiment. And yeah, that turned into a really fruitful collaboration too. But it was yeah, so that it was a bit of a unique PhD in that I spent 6 months abroad, but it went really well. Yeah.
And did you kind of know who you wanted to work with when you were looking for a PhD place, or did you fall into a place and you're like, oh, this person is doing what I love? How did that work?
Right. So I think what ultimately led to the program I picked was, so I went to the University of Illinois for my PhD, should have mentioned that. And that was the program I got into that probably just had the most breadth of chemistry sort of available to work on. So I was applying to analytical, physical, and even thinking possibly materials at that point. So I was kind of not totally focused, which in hindsight was good for me, but a little more focus probably would have done me well. But anyways, Illinois was a really great place in that it had strength in all those areas. So then at that point, I kind of just met with a lot of different groups, learned about the research, and I hadn't actually been that aware of, that was Professor Ben McCall's research. Wasn't too aware of him until I arrived and met him in the group. So that was sort of a discovery upon arrival. But there were, yeah, so that was what led me to go to Illinois and what ultimately led me to joining that group.
Cool. And then you started a postdoc and applied to the Beckman Foundation. So talk a little bit about like what led you to apply for this kind of funding?
Mm-hmm. So I yeah, had met so my postdoc mentor, one of my postdoc mentors, Professor Michio Okamura, met him at a Gordon conference and started talking about, if he was looking for postdocs, and he was doing work similar to what I had done in that it was infrared spectroscopy, but he is studying atmospheric molecules and doing chemical kinetics, so a different application. So I was hoping to pivot a little bit and learn those new skills. And then in that conversation during my PhD, it was like, well, let's look for different funding opportunities, and Beckman seemed like a great program in that it in its advertisement was very clear in that Beckman focused on technique development as well as understanding, these sort of fundamental chemistry problems that I was interested in were part of its scope. So in that sense, I felt like it was a good fit for the research we were doing, and that's what led me to writing the proposal for that work.
And winning that grant, is that when you moved to Caltech, or were you already there?
No, that's when I moved to Caltech with that funding. So Beckman was a huge help in that sort of step in my career, in that it really enabled that whole project, I would say.
Cool. And now I'd love to talk just a little bit about your current role, because now you are a postdoc at JPL, and I'd love to hear just a little bit about what that's like, and particularly, like, how's that different from being, a postdoc at Caltech, especially JPL and Caltech are pretty closely aligned. So what does that look like?
Right. So I came to JPL through the NASA postdoc program, working with the photochemistry and kinetics group. So JPL is part of Caltech technically, but it is a NASA center. And in that, the structure is very different than that of like an academic research environment. So I'm working with a group which has a group supervisor, but it's more composed of different research scientists working on their project, as opposed to, let's say, faculty or professors working on, have their lab and their graduate students. And also an environment like JPL is much more mission focused. So the research has to sort of apply to the mission of the lab, which for JPL is, the overall mission is unmanned spaceflight, which includes Earth observing satellites, which measure molecules in the atmosphere, in the upper atmosphere. And so it requires scientists who can study the chemistry and reactions around that to support that mission work. And so while we're still working on fundamental science, it has to be tied back to sort of this application of these missions. And so that is quite different. But I will say another difference is that resources at a national lab can be are quite different, in that to obtain a new piece of hardware in a university lab, it can take time. You have to write a grant, you have to wait until the money arrives, and you can purchase that thing. If you have money, where JPL, sometimes these places come up where they just have budget to just buy these sort of large items, and so you can kind of get equipment like that quickly. But that being said, you don't have access to as many like graduate students and other things, so there are trade-offs. But I would say, the fact that it's mission focused is probably the biggest difference in culture ultimately.
And how did you sort of prepare for that? I guess you'd worked there earlier, so maybe you were a little bit prepared for that, but coming out of an academic lab, like, did you do anything in particular, or think about sort of making that transition to a more almost business structured environment?
So two things were, for one, I was pretty well aware of what I was in for, having been there as an undergraduate, and also having worked with this group a bit, or having worked with this group during my postdoc at Caltech as well. So I kind of understood the dynamics of the group, but also knowing that for those sort of more academic things like broad chemistry seminars and working with graduate students, I knew that I could kind of keep those connections at Caltech too. So still was able to participate in some of those more like university academic activities. So I didn't feel like I was totally leaving those behind when I was coming to JPL. And then coming to JPL, able to take advantage of meeting these career scientists and these other resources that were available. So I was trying to see it as more like the best of both worlds, instead of a total shift in my mindset to research. And as far as the sort of the mission focused part, I think sort of working in that under those constraints, if you will, like you can still find still lots of interesting problems that I was really excited to work on. So in that sense, I didn't feel like I was avoiding problem or avoiding research topics that I felt like I couldn't study or something like that.
Mhm. So thinking back on your journey to where you are, what kind of advice would you give to people who are, maybe just looking at a broad range of options?
Right. I think, yeah, two things. I mean, one is probably repeated often here and elsewhere, which is to establish really good mentors as early as possible. These are long-term relationships that go beyond where you are at an institution, and people that you can go back to for advice and have gone through it before. So I think, even as an undergraduate, making relationships with your professors or graduate student who's mentoring you, all these things can be extremely valuable in navigating these spaces. The other one is to keep an open mind, to look at places like sort of don't pigeonhole yourself into one type of research early, because I think there's a lot of excitement that can happen when you bring lessons from one field to another. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, I think keep an eye out for opportunities, keep an eye out for exciting science that's going on that you might not be as familiar with, and just yeah, follow where you're excited. And that's what I would say.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your journey with us. Any parting thoughts?
Um, I think everyone good luck, and it's an exciting world if you're just starting out. And yeah, just know that there's always interesting things to work on. So yeah,
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate it.
welcome. Thank you so much for the invitation. Yeah.
Great.